Hi everyone, it's Neve here and welcome to the Scrap FX YouTube channel. Today we're going to be doing an art journal page using a lot of the Scrap FX stencils products. So I'm starting off in a large page in my Dylusions art journal, and this is just a use it up page. I've got sprays from a previous project that I've done, and I'm just sticking down lots and lots of collage papers. Now this page was done on a day that I wanted to do something in my art journal, but I had no plan for it. And that's this is a way I start a lot of my art journal pages. I just go into a random page and stick down some gel medium and stick down a whole heap of collage papers. Now the collage papers that you see sort of at the top of that page are scans and prints of use it up pages that I use in my art journals. I've actually, because I use them so often, I've sacrificed some good watercolor paper and I stick those in between my pages. You can see one sticking out on the left hand side. And any ink or paint or sprays or stamps or testing of pens is done on that page, and it ends up getting some really interesting textures on it. So when I think it looks really interesting, I'll go and scan it and pop it into my computer, and then I'll keep using it and then scan it again when it gets interesting again. And I just print it out either onto just plain paper or on sticker paper and use it in a lot of my projects. The other things I'm using on this page are some old gel prints. That's one I'm gluing down now. And I was very lucky to be gifted a whole set of encyclopedias. Someone was throwing them out, so I ended up taking them into care. And because they were going to be unwanted and go into the bin, I don't feel so bad about actually printing onto them and using them as scrapbook collage ephemera. So I do my gel prints on them, I roll my brayers onto them, I clean up pages on them. They're just really handy. I can just tear out a page and do something with it, and I've always got an interesting page. So once I'm happy gluing everything down with the gaps on my page, and just to blend everything together, I'm going in with the Dylusions paints. Now this is her latest range of paint, so the most recent release, which is actually about 1.5 years ago I think now, and they were all the pastel colours. So I think it was vanilla custard, mushy peas, rose quartz, periwinkle blue, and there's laid back lilac. So just going in with those colours, I really like them because while I absolutely adore the really bright colours, sometimes you need something slightly muted. And the thing that I really like about them is, though they're supposedly pastel colours, they're not really that really pale pastel, because I'm not really a pastel girl, has to be said. So with this, I'm going over my collage pieces and in the gaps, but you can still see the collage peeping through. I don't mind that I'm going over and hiding some of it, because I know I'm going to do this technique, which is to wipe away some of that wet paint. So I'm using another stencil here just of a big flower, just to wipe away most of the paint, so I get some of that collage coming back through and peeping through. So this is a technique called ghosting, and you just use a damp paper towel or use a wet wipe. I've got a set of wet wipes on my desk, and it's really easy to grab one and just wipe away the paint. And then I go in with my heat gun and dry it off. Now, because I tend to work very quickly, just that's my nature. I hate having things hanging over. I hate waiting for things to dry. I tend to use my heat gun a lot with my art journal, my projects. Some people like doing that, some people don't. It doesn't really affect the paint. If the paint is really thick on your page, it can make things bubble slightly. So just be aware. But with the Dylusions paint, it tends to go on quite thinly, so it dries really quickly. I'm just going in now with my Scrap FX stencils. This stencil is the Mark Making D stencil, random. It's got these sort of really random, almost like animal print blocks, and I'm going in with Pure Sunshine Dylusions paint. Now I've put barely any paint on my sponge, and you can see I'm still getting lots of prints on it. One of the tricks with stenciling is that you need to use a lot less paint than you think you would. That's a relatively small amount of paint for the amount of stenciling I'm going to be able to do with it. So once I'd done that, I thought I wanted a bit more brightness on this page, so I went in with the bubblegum pink to just brighten up that pink a little bit more. And while I was doing this, an idea sort of formed in my head. So up to this stage, I was just putting colour and layers down. I had that large flower in the background, and as I was putting down this print, I sort of suddenly realised it kind of looked like a flower petal. So that's what I decided to use it for. So I went back over with the pink and sort of turned it round in 360 degrees to make that sort of flower shape start to appear. It's kind of like a, if you sort of drew an outline around it, kind of reminds me of sort of a hibiscus shape, which I really loved. So this is where my ideas started to become crystallized, I suppose. It's really funny how it happens when you're art journaling. You sort of start off a bit random and not sure where you're going, and then suddenly things pop in your brain and like, oh yeah, that's what I could do. So this is something very unusual for me to do, but I actually cleaned up my stencil, and that's a small dilutions journal, which I use as my cleaner up journal. Anything I want swatched or cleaned off, I tend to go through that and clean it off in there, and then they end up with background pages just like the one I started off in this page that I can add things to. So just to ground my page somewhat, I decided that I wanted to add a horizontal line across the horizon. So again, I'm using the other side of the mark making stencil and doing those lovely random dots in the turquoise. Hello Calypso Teal, I think it's called. Again, it's another dilutions paint. And that gave a really strong grounding line. My video cut out, excuse me, but you can see I added some more stenciling in black with a dot stencil, and the triangle border along the bottom is another Scrap FX border stencil, and it's mark making seed border, and it's got 3 different border pages on it, which are also page borders on it, which you can use, which is fantastic. So I decided once I've done this that I need to have something on it, some sort of focal figure, and I've got this Jane Davenport palette book which comes with these faces in it. They're a slightly waxy paper which you need to be aware of, but it's a great face base that you can use. And to sort of blend it into the page, I've used some white gesso to extend out the hairline and to extend the neck. Now, I was deliberately fairly light on with the gesso in the hairline because I loved the background and I wanted to have that poking through the her hair, so you've got this interest in her hair. I'm going in with the Drama Stick at the moment, which is a waterproof oil pastel that does dry permanent, but you do need to leave it a little while before it becomes fully permanent. So don't go in, because it will smudge if you sort of rub it straight away. And again, using the Drama Sticks in the eyes. This is because the paper on here is slightly waxy. The Drama Sticks are a really good use of that because they do dry permanent and they don't smudge out. So I'm just going in again with that purple to give a little bit of shading around her face. And I was a bit silly doing this because then I decided I actually wanted to paint her face. So I'm going in with acrylic paint and just painting in with some neutral colours. When I go onto the face in particular and move it around, you'll see it moves around really nicely, which is great, and you get this base on it. But when it starts to dry, if you rub it too vigorously, it will peel off, and you can see that happening somewhat. I quite like the effect because it gives you this sort of textured effect in the background, but it can be really frustrating. So just be aware that you may need, if you're really worried about that, trace it onto some collage paper perhaps beforehand, or use a face shape that doesn't have that slightly waxy background. So I'm going in with some mermaid markers now, just to again add a little bit more shading and to blend it into the background. And you can see just on her neck where I'm fixing up now is where some of that paint came away. It didn't like adding the water-soluble markers over the top of the acrylic paint. It sort of had this weird reaction. But it's all in your art journal, and it's all a learning process. And that's why I love using art journals, because you get these really cool effects, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but you always learn something from it. And that's why I use my art journal as a process of creating something that I really love, playing with equipment that I haven't played with before. I want to sort of see how it's going and to see how they all work together. So now I'm going in with my Dina Wakley paints, and this is Ocean, and there's Lime below, and the medium I mixed into it is her glazing medium. And again, this is a medium that's been sitting on my shelf for a long time. Glazing medium is kind of like a gel medium, I suppose. It's a thicker bodied paint that spreads out and makes your acrylic paint more translucent, but it doesn't lose a body. So it just gives that glaze. Now you can do this by adding water, but it does affect the consistency of your paint. It doesn't keep that sort of acrylic heavy bodiedness, I suppose. It turns it into more of a watercolor. So this keeps it a little bit thicker and gives you a bit more texture to play with, which I wanted in her hair. But it also gives you that beautiful translucence. So even though I've got these colours going over the top, I can still see that pink coming through below. I can still see some of that collage and the text in the background. But it also blends in her hairline, even though you can kind of see where the body or the piece of collage paper went down. It does blend it in enough that you can kind of hide it. Now all I'm doing is going in with the Stabilo Oil Pencil, which is a water-soluble black pencil. It's really, really pigmented, and as soon as you touch it with water, it sort of inks out, and it's just a beautiful effect. If you put it down heavy enough, you can smudge it out slightly, but I tend to just use it with the water. So I'm just going in and redefining her face so it stands out, and putting in some more of those hairlines again that were slightly lost when I was painting over it. I would go back and use my drama stick again. I think I do later on, but I had the pencil sitting there. So this is the third Scrap FX stencil that I'm using, and it's one I use an awful lot, and it's called the Art Phrase stencil. So art is that in which the hand, the heart, the head and the heart go together, and it's just a beautiful way of summing up what art is, and it's something that I feel very strongly. So I love that I can put that sentiment into my art journal, particularly on a page like this that started off so random and then ended up with such a sharp focus for me. I love also the fact that you can split up the stencil. So I've got the art above the horizon line and then the phrase underneath. Just to make it stand out from the page somewhat, I'm going in with my white Sharpie, Posca paint pen, sorry, and just putting a little bit of shadowing on it just to stand that out from the background. So this is the final page. It came together really, really quickly. In real time, it only took me about an hour to do, and that was using the heat gun to dry it off. But it was lots of fun. One of my favourite things to do with mixed media is to do all those layers in the background and use all those stencils. So it was really lovely that they all worked together, and I just love that I was able to work out the randomness of that flower petal. Check out the links below in my description to find out the details for the Scrap FX stencil that I used, and a link to the Scrap FX blog where this project will be posted as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.